Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a deep swing at one of the most consequential names in global industry, Boeing.
Mm,
And for you, the listener, this isn't just a story about airplanes and, rockets.
not at all.
It's a crucial real-world case study for understanding how innovation, extreme financial pressure, and corporate culture all intersect in these really complex, high-stakes global dynamics.
That's the core of it, really. When we look at Boeing, we are examining one of the world's largest aerospace manufacturers. This is a company that touches commercial air travel, massive defense systems, and even space exploration.
Right.
And our stack of sources today gives us this rare look at how this organization, founded over a century ago, achieved such extraordinary market dominance, only to run into these fundamental and, I'd say, self-inflicted strategic challenges that we're still seeing play out.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack these sources to really understand the anatomy of extreme success and then the anatomy of an extreme crisis. We're going to dissect Boeing's strategy, look at that pivotal shift toward efficiency, and try to understand why the structure they created. Why it left them with vulnerabilities that had catastrophic real-world consequences.
It's the ultimate lesson in corporate risk management.
Okay, let's get into it. So starting with the environment they operate in. How does a company even begin to achieve market dominance when the price of entry is so astronomical?
Well, what's fascinating here is the market structure itself. Boeing exists in what you call a practical duopoly.
A duopoly, so just two major players.
Exactly. It's sharing the global stage with just one major competitor, Airbus. For you, the listener, this means two companies are responsible for supplying pretty much all of the large commercial passenger jets in the whole world.
And that structure isn't an accident, right? The barriers to entry here aren't just high, they are colossal.
They only are.
We're talking about financial commitments in the tens of billions of dollars just to design and certify a new aircraft from a clean sheet.
And that's before you even build one. Then you have to factor in years of stringent regulatory oversight, decades to build up the technical expertise.
And the global maintenance network.
Right. A global parts and supply network. It's this self-regulating barrier that just keeps any new large-scale competitors out of the game.
So because they aren't competing with, say, dozens of other companies, the whole dynamic changes.
It changes fundamentally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not about simple price wars, which would be financially ruinous for both of them.
Yeah.
Instead, the competition shifts to what economists call non-price competition.
Okay, so give us an example. How does that play out in the real world for an airline?
They compete primarily on what's called life cycle economics. So this involves constant innovation in aircraft performance.
Fuel savings.
Fuel savings are paramount. It's an airline's #1 variable cost. So they compete on range, on reliability, which means less maintenance downtime, and the quality of their after-sales support.
Things like pilot training, spare parts.
Exactly. An airline is making a 20 to 30-year bet on an airframe. So the initial price tag is often secondary to the long-term operational cost savings promised by the design.
And their history is just defined by that kind of innovation power. I mean, you look back at the iconic Boeing 747.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just a bigger plane. It was a societal transformer. It was the first jumbo jet.
Yeah.
It leveraged economies of scale and made long-distance intercontinental flights economically viable for the average person.
It basically democratized global air travel.
Right. That single design, the Queen of the Skies, didn't just transform Boeing, it transformed the entire world map.
And that's the brilliance of their peak, that ability to not just build a better product, but to define a whole new category of air travel. It proves that dominance is built on these huge technical and strategic leaps, not just small upgrades.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because that strategic dominance, built on engineering excellence, it started to face internal pressure, the drive for efficiency, the need to respond quickly to Airbus. It led to this fundamental pivot in how Boeing actually built its planes, a pivot that was, I think, epitomized by the 787 Dreamliner program.
The 787 was, on one hand, a magnificent engineering achievement. No doubt about it. It was revolutionary for its fuel efficiency, mostly because of the massive use of composite materials.
Carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber, yeah. It drastically reduced the aircraft's weight compared to the traditional aluminum. This was the technical leap Boeing needed.
But strategically, it was a massive shift in their business model, wasn't it? The sources really emphasized that Boeing moved from being this highly vertically integrated company
Where they made most things themselves.
to delegating design, engineering, and manufacturing to a massive, sprawling web of global suppliers.
Absolutely. Historically, Boeing had controlled that process so meticulously. The 787 model was about outsourcing risk and outsourcing cost.
The logic makes sense on paper.
Of course. The rationale was simple. Share the multi-billion-dollar development cost with your key suppliers. Speed up the whole development cycle and leverage specialized manufacturing expertise around the world to cut production costs.
Okay, that sounds great on a PowerPoint slide, but our sources suggest it dramatically increased their vulnerability. How did the sheer operational scale of this outsourcing challenge their traditional culture of quality control?
It was a perfect storm of complexity. Boeing manages, arguably one of the most complex industrial supply chains on the planet.
Yeah.
Think about it. An aircraft contains literally millions of parts, and they're sourced from dozens of countries. By outsourcing the design and engineering of huge sections of the plane, Boeing changed its role from master builder to master integrator.
And what we learned from those Dreamliner launch delays was that this lack of tight internal control created these massive coordination nightmares.
Total nightmares. The 787 program was years behind schedule, held up by everything from faulty fasteners and poorly engineered parts to just documentation errors coming from suppliers all over the globe.
It exposed a critical trade-off then.
It really did. While the strategy aimed for cost reduction, the loss of direct operational control ultimately inflated costs and severely impacted the timeline. The lesson was crystal clear. In high-precision, high-stakes industries, efficiency gained through delegation has to be balanced by rigorous, constant, and non-negotiable oversight.
And that experience with the 787, with its focus on cost and schedule compression, it seems like it established a cultural precedent that prioritized financial metrics over the historically sacred engineering process.
I think that's exactly right.
And that cultural environment, which had already prioritized shareholder value and speed over that traditional engineering discipline during the 787 program, well, it set the stage for the most critical moment in Boeing's recent history, the 737 MX crisis.
The 737X crisis, which followed two tragic accidents and led to the worldwide grounding of the aircraft, was not just a technical failure.
No.
It was a catastrophic manifestation of strategic and cultural decay.
Let's detail the financial consequences first because they were just immense. We're talking about Boeing hemorrhaging over $20 billion in losses.
An incredible number.
From grounded planes, lost orders, massive compensation payouts to airlines. The brand reputation that took a century to build was instantly fractured globally.
And that led to a dramatic decline in customer and investor confidence. But beyond the dollars, the crisis severely strained Boeing's relationship with its primary regulator, the FAA, and regulators worldwide.
So the trust that was required to, say, self-certify components, a privilege that Boeing had historically had,
Evaporated. Overnight, it led to intense scrutiny that continues to this day.
But the key insight when you dive into the sources is the underlying issues that were exposed. We have to talk about the technical compromise that defined the MAX. Why did they design the aircraft the way they did?
It was a direct response to Airbus's highly efficient A320neo. Boeing needed a fuel-efficient answer, but they desperately wanted to avoid designing an entirely new plane.
Because that would have cost tens of billions and taken a decade.
Exactly. So instead, they decided to re-engine the aging 737 design. The new, larger engines had to be mounted further forward and higher up on the wing.
Which created an aerodynamic problem.
Precisely. When those engines pushed the plane's nose too high in certain maneuvers, they risked an aerodynamic stall. So to counteract this, Boeing engineers designed the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MEK.
MCS, and its purpose.
The purpose of MCS was to automatically push the plane's nose down, making the 737 MAX handle like its older models. And this was key.
So it would avoid costly, time-consuming simulator training requirements for pilots?
You got it. And that's the strategic core of the failure. The push to save money on pilot training and operational cost for the airlines led to a design compromise that relied on a critical system, MCS, which was tied to one single angle of attack sensor.
It's one sensor.
Just one. So if that sensor failed, the system repeatedly forced the plane's nose down, with no easy way for the pilot to override it under stress.
And that's where the governance issue becomes so stark.
It really is. The sources reveal that the organization prioritized speed and cost-saving objectives, specifically avoiding that simulator requirement over engineering redundancy and rigorous safety vetting.
It just raises the central question about whether that shift in corporate culture from an engineering-first company to a finance-first company created an environment where such a dangerous technical compromise was even acceptable. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that even a company with immense market power, with stable, high, long-term cash flows from service contracts, it's fundamentally fragile.
Yeah.
Organizational compromises, when they touch safety and quality, can instantly jeopardize decades of financial stability. It's a brutal lesson in accountability, where poor strategic decisions made under financial pressure yield real human consequences.
That's right.
As we transition into the present day, the pressure on Boeing has only intensified, particularly from Airbus, which continues to dominate the single-aisle market with its A320neo family.
And they've heavily invested in the long-range A350. The duopoly is this constant game of high-stakes leapfrog.
And this competition is happening within a very volatile global framework. Boeing relies heavily on international sales, especially in massive markets like China.
Which means that global and geopolitical challenges directly impact their bottom line. We're not just talking about minor fluctuations here.
No, we're talking about trade disputes, political tensions that can delay or outright cancel multi-billion-dollar aircraft purchases.
When a major country like China holds off on ordering hundreds of jets because of political tensions or export controls, that immediately restricts Boeing's cash flow and their future planning. It really shows you the deep entanglement between global politics and high-tech industrial sales.
And beyond geopolitics, there is a huge sort of existential challenge looming now, the sustainability mandate.
Oh, absolutely. The aviation industry is under intense scrutiny for its contribution to climate change.
No.
Boeing is facing these overwhelming demands to develop aircraft that emit substantially less carbon.
And can use sustainable aviation fuels, or XF.
Right. And this isn't a peripheral concern anymore. It's a core strategic priority that demands immense, immediate R&D investment.
The goal of supporting global net zero commitments means Boeing has to fundamentally redesign propulsion systems, redesign airframes. It just introduces a whole new layer of risk and cost on top of everything else they're dealing with.
And to navigate this highly complex future, Boeing is placing some strategic bets that signal where they expect the next decades of growth to come from. We're seeing massive investments, not just in commercial jet design, but in next-generation aerospace fields.
Right. That includes their significant role in space exploration through Boeing Space, particularly with government contracts like those with NASA.
They're also deep into autonomous flight technology. And they're researching entirely new power sources, hydrogen electric aviation, which are still, a long way from being commercially viable, but they represent the only real path to meeting those net zero goals.
And critically, they're investing in advanced digital manufacturing. It feels like they're trying to rebuild the internal control they lost during that big outsourcing shift.
I think that's a great point. By creating digital twins of production lines and systems, they're aiming to regain that rigorous oversight and quality control that their legacy was built on. It demonstrates a long overdue return to engineering discipline.
So if we synthesize the central strategic lesson here for our listener, what is it?
I think it's this. Long-term success in these high-technology industries requires a really complex balance. Innovation and efficiency are necessary to compete, of course, but they have to be supported by an ironclad foundation of strong governance, a rigorous safety culture, and effective risk management.
And when those are compromised...
The Boeing story is a powerful reminder that when those foundational elements are compromised, especially under shareholder pressure, even a company with what seems like an insurmountable market position can face severe existential challenges.
A perfect summary of what we've learned from this stack of sources. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Boeing.
My pleasure.
And as you mull over everything we've discussed today, here is a final provocative thought for you to carry forward. If competition drives companies toward efficiency, but that efficiency risks compromising fundamental safety standards, especially in a market dominated by just two players, where does the responsibility ultimately rest to balance relentless market demands with public accountability and global safety? We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.